Ukraine's military has struck the Unecha oil pumping station, a critical hub on Russia's Druzhba pipeline, which carries oil to Europe. The attack set fire to fuel tanks and forced Hungary to halt crude deliveries, according to Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó, who called it another assault on energy security. Regional Governor Alexander Bogomaz confirmed the Unecha facility in Bryansk was hit by a combined drone and HIMARS missile strike, though he said the fire has since been extinguished. Unlike most EU states, Hungary and Slovakia remain heavily reliant on the Druzhba link, which also carries Kazakh oil to Germany. The renewed disruption underscores Europe's continuing vulnerability to the conflict's energy war, even as US President Donald Trump pushes for a negotiated end. Ukraine's military has struck the Unecha oil pumping station, a critical hub on Russia's Druzhba pipeline, which carries oil to Europe. The attack set fire to fuel tanks and forced Hungary to halt crude deliveries, according to Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó, who called it another assault on energy security. Regional Governor Alexander Bogomaz confirmed the Unecha facility in Bryansk was hit by a combined drone and HIMARS missile strike, though he said the fire has since been extinguished. Unlike most EU states, Hungary and Slovakia remain heavily reliant on the Druzhba link, which also carries Kazakh oil to Germany. The renewed disruption underscores Europe's continuing vulnerability to the conflict's energy war, even as US President Donald Trump pushes for a negotiated end. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School. Joins us live from India. Thank you very much for joining us today. Good to see you, Professor. Professor, do you think that Europe is doing enough in considering that Hungary and Slovakia are still heavily reliant on Russian oil?
Both are correct. I think Europe is doing enough, the European Union and NATO. And Hungary and Slovakia, they have governments that unfortunately are very much in contrast with the rest of the European Union. They are supportive of Russia. And it's really inexplicable. And I remember 35 years ago, we were all proud of countries like Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Poland, breaking up with the communist regimes and moving into a democratic, rule of law-based, human rights-oriented governments. But see, today they are very nationalistic and they're very egoist, similar to Donald Trump, by the way, both of them. And for that matter, in Europe, we have a division, but luckily, only two countries, Hungary and Slovakia, not the rest of the European Union at all, are, in fact, interestingly, this hit of the oil refinery pipelines is exactly for the oil that is exported from the Russian Federation to Hungary and Slovakia. So somehow there is some justice in that the hit by Ukraine of the oil pipelines will affect Hungary and Slovakia.
And Professor, do you think is there any feasible path for Europe to reduce, especially Hungary and Slovakia, to reduce its dependence on Russian energy? Or do you think these governments, you mentioned that they are very Trump-like, do you think they won't change their stance?
A lot of countries did immediately that. My government in Bulgaria immediately, over the several weeks back in 2022 when the aggression started, actually eliminated any dependency. Bulgaria was 90% dependent on oil and gas from the Russian Federation. Very quickly, the government at the time simply stopped contracts with any Russian suppliers. They went to the market, they found alternatives like Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Saudi, Qatari, Emirates. There are many countries selling oil and gas. It's not only Russia. And all countries should have done this long time ago, 3.5 years ago. So there is no excuse for Hungary and Slovakia to be dependent on Russian oil and gas. There are plenty of suppliers. The governments in Hungary and Slovakia should simply do what everybody else did in Europe already 3.5 years ago. So no excuse, no regret, no mercy. Slovakia and Hungary need to reorient their imports. Simple.
And Professor, do you think this war will end soon? Like we see that there's a limbo now. Last week there was a lot happening. This week we don't see anything happening. But from both sides, there escalated attacks on infrastructure of energy. Do you think it will come to end?
Well, the answer to this question is kind of relating to the previous ones, because as many countries stop buying Russian oil and gas, less money will come to the coffin of Vladimir Putin and Kremlin, and less equipment and military weapons and soldiers will be recruited. So the answer to the question is global sanctions on Russia, stop buying oil and gas from Russia, and that very much concerns other countries like India. And the war will be over. In fact, if there were global sanctions on Russia in the first place, back 3.5 years ago, Russia would have had no money to fight anymore. In fact, I will argue if Putin knew that all countries in the world will embargo its oil and gas exports, he would have not invaded Ukraine, because there would have been already an economic collapse. Russia can survive only on exporting oil and gas, nothing else. They don't produce anything apart from exporting oil and gas, and they live on that money. So the answer to the question when the war will end depends on countries that still buy oil and gas. They should stop that, but also all countries in the world should give Ukraine all the necessary support, including military. A lot of countries do that. Over 50 countries support Ukraine with military support. Over 140 countries in the world support Ukraine politically, and that should also continue for the final end.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Veselin Popovsky, for always joining us and sharing your insight. Thank you.